So I ended up diving into a deep rabbit hole this week when asking the question, why was Jerusalem destroyed? So this question is on my mind because, as I said, Tisha B'Av begins Saturday night. And this question is really embedded in the psyche of the Jewish people, especially this time of year because of this holiday, which commemorates many disasters that have fallen the Jewish people on this day in history, the 9th of the Hebrew month of Av, hence the name Tisha B'Av, such as the destruction of both the first and second temples in Jerusalem, among many others. And so this question that our people have been asking for millennia is, why was Jerusalem destroyed in the first place? And so there are a few ways to begin to attempt an answer. It's really, how do you answer any question, A, that begins with why, and B, that is a historical fact of something that happened, like, why did it happen? It happened. Move on. But there are a few ways to begin to attempt an answer. And so, of course, first there is historically an answer, which is that Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 586 BCE, and the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 CE. And we're going to focus on the second temple destruction a little more today. But historians like Israeli professor Isaiah Gaffney argued that the Roman military was invincible at the time. And so there was no match on the planet for the military might as they conquered land after land, territory after territory. But we're left kind of wondering, what does this answer, this historical answer, offer us? What do we learn from it? What do we grow? How do we grow from that? And so, does it offer us anything other than a way to relieve ourselves or our ancestors of any responsibility for why Jerusalem was destroyed? But we want more. We want an answer that leaves room for growth than this strictly historical interpretation. And so on the other end of the spectrum, we have a spiritual attempt to answer this question, which luckily I am not the first person to attempt. So I can use all of the expertise of our ancient sages and rabbis. But so we ask the question, what meaning can we find for ourselves in this holiday that Reform Judaism traditionally doesn't connect with as much? We're not looking to rebuild the third temple in Jerusalem. And if you want to talk about more about that later, I'm happy to talk to you about it. It's a really fascinating little piece. So the rabbis of the Babylonian Talmud, instead of blaming or just saying or stating matter-of-factly the Romans were going to overpower us no matter what, they instead turned the blame to the Jewish people. Okay? So the rabbis argue over the primary cause in Tractate Shabbat, each one citing a different sin of the residents of Jerusalem, of the Israelites, of the ancient Jews who lived there. So why was the city destroyed? They respond, I think it's because the people, they desecrated Shabbat, said one rabbi. Another rabbi said, its citizens intentionally omitted recitation of Shema in the morning and evening, and then it has a side note, because they were drinking. Another rabbi says, because school children were interrupted from studying Torah. Another rabbi says, because people had no shame before one another. Another says, the small and great citizens were equated. I imagine the rabbis having a really great problem with this since they see themselves as the great citizens and feeling like they're getting no respect. So they feel like that's why Jerusalem may have been destroyed. Another explanation says that the people did not rebuke each other. They did not tell each other when they were doing things wrong. Another says because they disparaged Torah scholars. Again, this is in the rabbis' interest to say, you're the reason Jerusalem was destroyed. You didn't respect me enough. And another rabbi says because there were no trustworthy people there. And this is all in the same section of the Talmud. So why would they do this? Why would they spend all of this energy trying to just blame other people for why this huge calamity occurred? And perhaps, according to their worldview, the worldview of our ancient rabbis and sages, their worldview is that God would only allow the center of Jewish life to fall, to be obliterated, if the people deserved it. Or perhaps, with our modern sentiments, as Rabbi Sharon Brous argues, our ancient sages insist that we not only grieve the death and destruction on Tisha B'Av, but we also consider how our own behavior contributed to suffering. We reject the simple victim-villain analysis, she says. We instead learn to see multiple layers of truth. So this idea of the rabbis having so many explanations for what may have happened here is really a lesson for what we do with this holiday, which is to look more deeply into ourselves, to see, yes, even if everyone had looked inside themselves and figured out how to be nicer people, stronger people, the Romans probably still would have won. But no one would have been able to say that the Jews weren't kind to each other, that people weren't respectful, that people weren't humble. And so when we're trying to see these multiple layers of truth, we also have to turn that on ourselves and realize that we are not one truth. A human is a series of contradictions often as well. And even more important in this exploration of why Jerusalem was destroyed is this message that we're not completely powerless. Yes, again, we may not have been able to overcome the might of the Romans, but we do have power when it comes to seeing inside ourselves. Even if we cannot combat overwhelming external forces, we can look deep within ourselves and use our power to change. There's one other story in the Talmud found in a separate tractate. I actually found this question of why Jerusalem was destroyed is actually, besides this one huge list that I shared with you at the beginning, there are at least 3 different tractates besides this one that also try to answer this question, which is not totally unusual. The Talmud is not organized in the most succinct or clear way, or rational way. But there's another story that the rabbi shares somewhere else. And I think one of the things I love about it is that they maintained it because the ancient rabbis were the ones deciding which stories would be kept as part of our tradition. Even if they put it in a tractate not with this long list, so someone else would have to study a little bit further into the Talmud to find it. But you may have noticed when I shared those reasons that none of the reasons given for the destruction of Jerusalem placed any blame on the rabbis. But there is a story that does, and it is actually perhaps the most well-cited reason given for why Jerusalem was destroyed, and that's the tale of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. I will do my best to tell it very briefly, even though it's a telenovela in itself. But so what happens in the Talmud is they say that there was a wealthy man who was throwing a party. He loved this guy. He thought the life of every party was this guy named Kamsa. So he told one of his assistants, go get Kamsa. He's going to be the life of my party. I'm going to have the best party in Jerusalem. It's going to be wonderful. The problem is there's another guy in town named Bar Kamsa. So, easy to be confused. So what happens instead is Bar Kamsa gets the invite to the party, not Kamsa. So Bar Kamsa shows up. He also happens to be the sworn enemy of the wealthy man throwing the party. And so what happens is the wealthy man says, sorry for the mistake. You are super not invited. You need to leave. And Bar Kamsa is like, dude, I'm here. There's wine. There's food. Like, I'll be cool. I'll pay for whatever I eat or drink. Like, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. I'll be cool. And the wealthy man is like, I don't think so. You need to leave. So Bar Kamsa is like, okay, I'll pay for half the party. And he's like, no, I don't think you understand. I don't want you to be here. So this is not going well for Bar Kamsa. It doesn't make the wealthy man look good either. And he's like, fine, I'll pay for the whole party. And finally, the wealthy man says, no, you just actually need to leave. And so when that happens, there's obviously been this huge scene. And some of the people at the party, which I love, are the ancient rabbis. Some of the sages are there at this party. They're seeing what's happening, what's going on. But they're enjoying their wine. They're enjoying the party. Rabbis can enjoy wine too. And so they decide they're not going to get involved. And so Bar Kamsa noticed that the rabbis were there, the leaders of their community, and that they said nothing. They watched him get dragged out by the wealthy man and his assistant and did nothing. So Bar Kamsa said, clearly, the rabbis don't deserve to be in power. This entire city should be destroyed, which if you get thrown out of a party, I plead with you not to decide to destroy an entire city, but we can understand him being upset. He says clearly the rabbis should not be in control. And so witnessing this public humiliation led Bar Kamsa to feel like The whole world was out to get him. No one deserved to be happy if someone was going to humiliate him like that. And so what he decides to do is to inform to the Romans and ask the Romans to send a calf to slaughter as a gift for the Jews, the Israelites. And then Bar Kamsa famously puts a blemish on the cow. It was confusing as to whether it's the lip or the eyelid. It's like a really interesting side tunnel to get. See, this is what I mean when I get in a rabbit hole with Jewish tradition. It's like you go down this other thing and you're like, why am I here now? But so he makes the calf so it's not eligible to be a sacrifice. And so the rabbis start arguing, what do we do? This is a gift from Rome. If we don't sacrifice it, we look like we're spitting in the face of Caesar. If we do sacrifice it, it makes us look like we're saying, hey, anyone can sacrifice a blemished calf now, which would be really great for people because since animals had to be perfect to be sacrificed, you had to take care of them very, very carefully. And so it was not uncommon for an animal to get a scratch or anything like that. So it would be great news for the people because, they have plenty of those scratched cows. They don't have very many ones that aren't. And so the rabbis try to figure out what to do, and one of them comes up with the plan, we should just kill Bar Kamsa. Not a good thought. Not a good thought. They end up deciding not to do that, thank God, but they also decide not to sacrifice the calf. And so Bar Kamsa goes back to Caesar and says, see, the Jews don't love you. The Jews don't appreciate you. They disrespect you openly. Are you going to stand for this? And so that is said to be the moment that Rome decided to destroy Jerusalem because of a party gone wrong. And so because the rabbis did nothing at that party, because they did not defend Bar Kamsa there, because they were paralyzed with indecision about what to do with what was unfolding before them, because they did not evaluate their own actions or their inactions or reactions to what was happening, the temple was destroyed. So if we remain ignorant to the cracks found in our walls, we too will be destroyed. We have all of these different stories, all of these different ideas to answer this question of why was Jerusalem destroyed. And our tradition doesn't actually tell us which one's right, which is why it's found so many different places in the Talmud. It's not just in one place, and not one place says this is the answer. But it's because we are pushed to continually look at ourselves. And one of my favorite books to read at this season is called This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared. It's a book by Rabbi Alan Lew to prepare for High Holy Days. He argues that it is Tisha B'Av that the work of teshuvah, the work of repentance, the work of turning actually begins. And so how does this holiday help us do that? It's because during Tisha B'Av, we are forced to look back into the dark and ugly events of history, but also into the dark and ugly events of our own history. We are told to turn around and look at the wake of what is left behind us. We're also told to tear down walls, just like the walls of Jerusalem fell, even though that was hard and awful. It allowed us to look at ourselves and see what had been going on. We cannot ignore those parts of ourselves with the cracks. We are not powerless. Tisha B'Av is our reminder to break down our walls so that we can truly look into our hearts in order to open ourselves up to change, to be the turning that we need before we lead up to the High Holy Days in 7 weeks. Shabbat Shalom.